Sure, sure. Well, thanks for inviting me today. I'm really excited to, speak out to multiple communities about IoT and the benefit and the momentum that's happening in LoRaWAN. So, I have about 28 years of experience working for mostly wireless companies. Telia Mobitel in Stockholm, the Dutch PTT in Holland, your home area, as well as KDDI in Tokyo and Bezek in Tel Aviv. And predominantly, I was there as a consultant to help identify different ways of monetizing underused assets. And that has translated very nicely into the job that I do now today with Senet. Senet provides cloud-based network services for the early and accelerated deployment of LoRaWAN networks. So we have networks in cities and towns throughout the US, as well as over cities and towns in India with our partner Senra. And it's been really exciting, really interesting to see how new use cases are being generated and developed every day in our foundry, as well as with multiple different companies throughout the world. And the fact that LoRaWAN is an open standard, so you can really start to see your product on a network very, very quickly.
Great, great, thank you. And before we dive too deep into IoT, just tell us a little bit more about your own background and how you got into IoT and what it is about IoT that makes you so passionate about it.
Sure, sure. Well, I was one of the first computer science graduates from the University of Denver, and I went there on a gymnastics scholarship. And I think the whole concept of being the first in a technology field and having to kind of forge the path through something that was at that time, not very comfortable or ubiquitous. It was something that was unusual. And the sport of gymnastics kind of taught me day by day, bit by bit, you just keep plugging at it. And, you might not see big changes that happen immediately, but you'll see small changes over the course of time. And so I saw IoT as that same kind of metaphor. It's like a small bit by bit, step by step, keep plugging away. And some of the markets that we're getting in today have really kind of adopted that same philosophy. Farmers that are in the Midwest, hospitals that are looking for incremental improvement on how they track assets or how they understand the cleanliness of the products that they use across different rooms in clinics and hospitals. And so it's been a great philosophy for me, and one that I've it's continued to drive not just my professional life but my personal life. I have kids that are also in sports, and they have kind of use that same philosophy. I don't tell them, you need to be the best in your sport. Just, today, make sure you're a little bit better today than you were yesterday. And then that's how we all get better.
It's a really nice analogy actually for IoT. And, I think when I first came into this industry, you were one of the first people that I really understood the ecosystem from. Working remote to different continents, it didn't matter. It was actually all about who can we work together, pull together to create a joint solution.
Right.
And I think it's that ecosystem that I just would like you to talk about a little bit more now. So just the kind of the important pieces of the puzzle that you see from your position and from your position within Senet. You have a really nice overview of where the business is. You're also a lot of your customers are still within IoT, and it's their customers who are then the users of IoT. So maybe
Sure.
you could expand on that a little bit.
Sure. Well, one of the things that in IoT has driven some of confusion is the fact that the devices, I've got one right here actually, this device, it doesn't have a screen on it the way this does, so you have the difference of roles and responsibilities. You have device manufacturers and you have application developers. And bringing all of those entities together, and it's not necessarily that the best device manufacturer has the same skill set as an application developer. And there are components and libraries and interfaces and analytics engines that are all part of the ecosystem and the partnership that bring it all together. And it can be quite overwhelming. And the nice thing about some of the products that we have put into our lab is there are end-to-end solutions that take everything from the application through the device and say, here, in a box, this is good for you. You can go out there and use it. But where I see the biggest opportunity today is, just like on your phone, you've got multiple apps. And I might track, my workout, my nutrition, my movement on my watch. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to decide, based on these small little bits of information, how can I optimize my health? Is there something I can be doing today over the next 10 years that will prohibit me from, suffering any kind of cardiac issues? And the same thing happens with farms and with hospitals. They want to have all those pieces of information pulled together. So at the end of the day, IoT is definitely a new area, and the need is for companies, systems integrators, really thought leaders and consultants that are in each of those individual silos, kind of helping to come together and guide. And it's very confusing for the small guys, the fuel distributors that we work with, or the hospitals, they're overwhelmed by the amount of information. So we really have to make it simple. And one of the nice things that's happened over the Wi-Fi industry in the last 10 years or so is that Wi-Fi is like this standard, consistent, open component that everyone can build upon, and you can encapsulate and package it a solution that it makes it easier for the consumer to use. And that's really what's happening with LoRaWAN as well, is you've got the now encapsulating multiple solutions to deliver an end benefit to the farmer, the hospital, or hospitality industry, siloed one-off solution.
Nice. That's a really kind of nice analogy of how the Wi-Fi has matured to the point where consumers can really get the benefit easily, and how LoRaWAN is now taking that a more industrial scale. And it's funny, I sometimes, when I'm describing what Sensatera was doing, it was kind of, imagine Wi-Fi but for farmers. Like across a whole farm. So it's a nice analogy when you're looking at it, the simplicity of one and how it's a stepping stone to the next.
Definitely.
So when we talk about kind of then the principles or underlying kind of design within IoT, what we also find though is that a lot of the data that's collected is not necessarily being used. Is there any kind of thoughts that you have on that, about people when they're designing their systems or designing for IoT, what they should be really thinking about? What are the kind of key benefits of it?
There's definitely an enormous amount of data that has not yet been tapped into, and trying to understand the different partnerships in the ecosystem to develop monetization of that data, because harvesting that data is complicated, and it takes time and effort and money. And when you think about, again, I'll go back to tank monitoring. This unit can track the level of fuel that is in every tank that has one of these, a compressed propane tank. And imagine if the oil industry and the refineries could get access to the data across every tank in America, in the world. Then all of a sudden that data is enormously valuable. How quickly are they filling them up? How long is the distance to get from one to another, from the source to the destination? Now you can, think about arbitraging fuel prices. There's a lot of good and bad, information that can become available, but who's going to buy that data? Who's going to sell that data? And certainly we've seen in municipalities and a lot of smart city solutions, they're concerned about giving away that data and not being able to understand the value of that data. Some of them overvalue that data. How important is it to know, how much trash is collected? Maybe to someone, but maybe not to the trash collector. And so we're certainly seeing a lot of thought leaders in the market, a lot of systems integrators who are learning how to fill all the pieces and bring all the partners to the table. Partnerships are going to be really key, and enabling kind of a global ecosystem of how valuable is that single component of data.
Yeah.
And I'd love to be there. I'd love to be involved in that. I don't know what the answer is.
But yes, it's trying to make complicated things simple enough that you can then get value out of it, or being really strategic in how you think about what you need and be very focused on what you collect. Yeah, there's a number of different ways that you can approach that kind of problem. Okay, so if we kind of go back to you and your journey within IoT, and kind of in preparation kind of for this interview, you kind of talked about kind of what success is for you as a person, and then for you within IoT. What do you see as being something that you consider to be like a success for you?
Well, I would say, personal fulfillment around seeing people grow, and also, helping, certainly in this day and age, helping people, entities, companies that are struggling is now more important than ever, and something that I value tremendously. I've seen now a lot of companies that are not just struggling, that are probably going to be going away, and you want to understand, what if there's just a little bit of help that I can do here, and that little help will sustain that company through the end of this quarantine. I think success is also having a lot of, personal fulfilling relationships. Again, now at this introspective time, I'm thinking, oh, how many projects did I sell? Those things don't really matter anymore. It's really, who are the friends that are coming through and saying, do you need something? Can I help you? And I think that really is the definition of success.
Great. And then we also talked about kind of leadership style, and I really liked kind of your kind of approach to that, where you kind of talked about 4 steps, and kind of some of the things that you talked about I've heard others talk about, but maybe you could expand on that. So can you remember what you wrote?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's funny because you asked me what my favorite book is too, and that's probably, I'm leading you into the next question. But the Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, they guide everything about my personal and professional life. We talk to our kids about what do they need to do. Think of the end in mind. Try to make small improvements, which is what I talked about at the beginning of the interview. But the 4 things that I think guide everything that I think about is, do a little bit every day. As I mentioned, if I can be just a little bit better today than I was yesterday, then that's a big improvement. I really love the Tim McGraw song, humble and kind, and kind of, appreciate that you didn't get where you were going without a whole bunch of people helping you, and, look back behind and help others to come up the ladder with you. And then think about focusing on creating opportunities. If I'm not creating wealth and opportunities, and wealth can be defined as monetary wealth, personal wealth, there's a lot of different ways to define wealth, but if I'm not defining and creating wealth in the company that I'm in and in the environment that I'm in with my family, then it lacks kind of meaning. So creating that opportunities and wealth are really important. And then I do have a passion towards enabling women, and having been one of the first women at the University of Denver to graduate with a computer science degree, I've gone back to my alma mater multiple times to, help mentor, to guide, to, network, to enable, new graduates that are coming out of the program. There are many more women today than there were back in my day and age. But sometimes it's just that little bit of encouragement that keeps them going. And they might be in the middle of, a classroom that is all men, and just being someone on the outside saying, don't worry, you can do it. Sit at the table, you have enough self-esteem to be there just with everybody else. And that kind of helps them to keep going.
Great. Thank you. Yeah. And I think you touched on the book there. So I think that kind of helps explain why you talked about there. And I want to use that as almost like a list of inspiring things, which will just be its own list for people to dive into, because I think it's always nice to feel where people's inspirations have come from. And I can see that it's helped mold you and focus you in some ways. And it's funny, when we all joined, I think the first Christmas I was at Senet, we all got that book.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, yeah. It's funny. I have mine right here. It's a very dog-eared, used copy, and it's amazing how this Stephen Covey he hit it right on the head. A lot of these concepts are eternal. They still matter today. He wrote this book, back in 1990.
Yeah. Well, it's humans. It's about being human, and that doesn't change. All the technology in the world is continuously changing. But people are people, and the behaviors, the changes, the communication is always, goes back to the same cycle.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about that, then let's just kind of close off with a couple of things then, more about the learnings that you've had then, and maybe more specifically over the last 5-10 years within IoT. And new people are coming into this all the time. This is something where people know that it can help in some way, but they don't necessarily know how. What advice do you have for someone coming into the business in IoT, more wanting to apply it to their business and their building, their city, whatever it is? And what words of advice would you have for them when considering their IoT solutions?
Sure. Well, a lot of entities and companies come to the table with, a technology or a solution that's trying to find a problem. And building owners, hospitality, hospitals, farms, they have more than enough problems that they're dealing with every day without having to, find a problem that they can solve. And if you solve that one problem, and you solve that very well with IoT, then that is the road to enable you to move to the next step. We did this really well. It was very cheap, very easy, AA battery. It lasts a very long time out there in the field, and it's reliable. And so the field distributors are like, I need this, and if you find that perfect storm of problem solving, technology enablement and price, it has to be done at a price point that can be scaled, because you can't buy $1,000 solution for these tank monitors. It's not going to give them the benefit over the life of the solution. So jumping all the way ahead to this data analytics, full single pane of glass with a solution that drives solutions into farms is only going to be beneficial if it's solving problems that they have today. So that would be my first bit of advice. The second bit of advice that we've certainly learned is, again, partnerships. No one company is going to do this by themselves. Relationships and partnerships are really important, and it's hard to kind of understand that burgeoning company that's over, in Ohio that solved this flood solution, and because they may not have a lot of the money to do marketing. So it's really important to kind of, ask a lot of questions. I leave every meeting, are there one or two companies that you would recommend that I talk to? Because, then they'll make a recommendation and they'll make a recommendation. And all of a sudden, I've really got a lot of companies that other people have recommended that I talk to because they have a problem that IoT might be able to solve.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Noelani.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.